It was a quiet evening in Cape Town. The city lights glowed softly outside Zuri's small apartment as she kicked off her shoes after another long night shift at the hospital. Her body ached, but she felt proud. She had made it through another tough week. She brewed herself a cup of tea, ready to unwind, when her phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up Mama Thandi. Zuri smiled instantly. It had been months since they last spoke properly. She picked up, her voice warm. "Hi, Mama." But what she heard next froze her. Her mother's voice trembled, thin and weak. "Zuri, I'm very sick, my girl. The doctor says it's serious. Please come home." Zuri's heart pounded. "Sick? What happened? Which doctor? Are you in the hospital?" Her mother only coughed softly and whispered, "Just come, my child. I need you." Tears blurred Zuri's eyes. The last time they talked, it ended in shouting. Over money, over pride, over everything that sits between mothers and daughters when love gets heavy. She hadn't seen her mother in almost 2 years, and now, this call felt like it could be the last. She didn't hesitate. With shaking hands, she opened her laptop and booked the first flight to Johannesburg. She threw clothes into a suitcase between sobs, whispering to herself, "Just hold on, Mama. I'm coming." Before leaving, she called her boss to explain. "I might need a few days, maybe longer," she said quietly. "My mother's really sick." When she hung up, her tea sat untouched on the table, now cold, just like the sudden fear sitting deep in her chest. Zuri's flight touched down in Johannesburg just after noon. The air was warm, heavy with that familiar mix of dust and diesel she hadn't smelled in years. Her heart raced as she wheeled her suitcase through the terminal. Every step felt urgent. She had imagined her mother in a hospital bed, weak and frail, maybe with tubes in her arms. The thought made her chest ache. When she reached the house, her taxi stopped in front of the old gate she knew so well. The paint chipped, the bougainvillea climbing higher than she remembered. She jumped out before the driver could help with her bag. Her hands trembled as she knocked on the door, her throat tight with worry. Then the door swung open. There stood Mama Thandi, strong, bright, and smiling wide. She wore a colorful dress and a head wrap that matched, her gold bangles jingling as she reached out for a hug. "Surprise," she said, her voice full of cheer. Zuri froze for a moment. Her eyes scanned her mother from head to toe. She didn't look sick at all. Her cheeks glowed, her eyes sparkled, and the smell of fried chicken drifted from the kitchen. "Mama, you said you were sick," Zuri whispered, her voice cracking with confusion. Her mother laughed lightly, waving a hand as if brushing away a small misunderstanding. "Oh, I was. But the Lord healed me quickly, my child. You know how prayer works." Zuri blinked, trying to process what she was hearing. She wanted to believe her. Maybe it really was a miracle, but something in her stomach twisted. It didn't feel right. She forced a small smile and followed her mother inside. The house looked exactly the same. Family photos on the walls, the smell of polish and cooking oil, the radio playing old gospel songs in the background. It should have felt like home, but it didn't. It felt staged, like a play where everyone knew their lines except her. As her mother danced around the kitchen, humming and stirring a pot, Zuri unpacked her bag slowly in her old room. She glanced around at the posters still hanging, the faded bedsheets she used as a teenager. She hadn't realized how much she'd outgrown this space until now. That evening, they sat together for dinner. Her mother talked nonstop, about the neighbors, the church, a new women's group she joined. Zuri nodded along, trying to stay present, but her mind kept circling back to that phone call. The trembling voice. The fear. The way her mother said, "Please come home." None of it matched this cheerful woman sitting across from her now. Later that night, when the dishes were done and the house had gone quiet, Zuri walked to her room, ready to sleep off the confusion. But as she passed the living room, she heard her mother's voice, light and laughing. "Yes, she came," Mama Thandi said on the phone, her tone full of triumph. "I told you she would drop everything. My daughter will always come when I call." Zuri stopped in her tracks, her breath caught in her throat. In that moment, the truth hit harder than any sickness ever could. Her mother hadn't needed her out of love or desperation. She had called her out of control. Zuri stood there in the dark hallway, the laughter still echoing from the next room, and felt something inside her quietly break. The next morning, Zuri woke up to the sound of laughter and music. At first, she thought she was dreaming. The noise was too loud for her mother's quiet house. But when she looked out the window, she saw people in the yard setting up tables, hanging bright balloons, and carrying trays of food. The smell of barbecue drifted through the air. She stepped into the hallway, still half asleep. "Mama, what's going on?" Her mother's voice came from the kitchen, cheerful and busy. "Oh, my child, you're awake. Go freshen up. We're having guests today." Zuri frowned. "Guests? For what?" But Mama Thandi didn't answer directly. She just smiled wide and waved her wooden spoon. "You'll see. It's a celebration." By noon, the house was full. Neighbors, relatives, and even some people Zuri barely recognized filled the room. There was music, loud laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Zuri tried to smile, but she felt out of place, like a visitor in her own home. Her mother moved through the crowd proudly, introducing her to everyone. "This is my daughter, the nurse. She's finally home," she said, her voice full of pride. "Working hard in Cape Town, helping people every day." Everyone cheered and clapped. Zuri forced a smile, but inside, she felt uneasy. She hadn't come home for a celebration. She'd come because she thought her mother was dying. As the afternoon went on, she escaped to the kitchen for a break. That's when her cousin Busi walked in, holding 2 plates of food. "Hey, Zuri," Busi said softly, glancing around before lowering her voice. "Don't be mad, okay?" Zuri looked up. "Mad about what?" Busi hesitated. "Auntie wanted you here for the family event, for Uncle Saifo's business launch. She said you wouldn't come unless it was serious." Zuri froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Wait, she lied? About being sick." Busi bit her lip. "She just wanted everyone together. And she missed you. But, you know how she is." The words hung in the air like smoke. Zuri felt her chest tighten. She set her plate down slowly, trying to keep her voice calm. "So she made me believe she was dying, for a party?" Busi didn't answer. She just looked away, guilt written all over her face. Zuri walked out quietly, the sound of laughter and music growing louder around her. Her mother's voice echoed through the yard. "My daughter came all the way from Cape Town. See how much she loves her family." Everyone clapped again, cheering, unaware of the truth. Zuri stood by the doorway, her expression blank. The joy around her felt fake now, hollow and cold. She watched her mother smile and realized this wasn't love. This was manipulation dressed up as affection. She turned and walked back inside, the noise fading behind her. For the first time, she didn't feel like a daughter coming home. She felt like a pawn in her mother's game. That night, Zuri sat on the edge of her old bed, staring around the room that hadn't changed since she was a teenager. The same faded posters hung crooked on the wall, the same perfume bottles sat half full on the dresser, and the same cracked mirror leaned in the corner. It felt like stepping into a memory she thought she'd outgrown. She ran her fingers over the bedsheet, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on her. The laughter from outside still floated through the window, her mother and the guests celebrating long into the night. Zuri had tried to join them earlier, but every laugh, every proud story her mother told, only made her feel smaller. She thought about the phone call that had pulled her here, her mother's trembling voice, the panic, the rush to leave everything behind. All for this? A party. The longer she sat there, the more the memories started to sting. She remembered the day she told her mother she was moving to Cape Town for work. Mama Thandi had stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes full of judgment. "So you're leaving me now?" "After everything I've done for you," she had said. When Zuri tried to explain that it was a good job, a fresh start, her mother only called her ungrateful. That word had followed her for years, whispered in phone calls, thrown into arguments, carved deep into her heart. The laughter from the living room grew louder. Someone turned up the music. Zuri's hands clenched into fists. She couldn't sit there anymore. She walked out of her room and down the hallway, her heartbeat quick and sharp. When she reached the living room, her mother was there, still smiling, surrounded by relatives. Zuri stood in the doorway until her mother noticed her. "What's wrong, my child?" Mama Thandi asked lightly, still holding a glass of juice. Zuri's voice came out low but firm. "You made me fly across the country because you couldn't admit you just wanted attention?" The room went quiet. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably. Her mother's smile faded into a scoff. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. You never visit. I had to do something to get you home." Zuri's chest tightened. "Something that cost me my job, my money, my peace?" Her voice shook, but she didn't back down. "You lied to me, Mama. You made me believe you were dying." Mama Thandi rolled her eyes and set her glass down. "You always exaggerate. You're just like your father, always making everything about feeling." The words hit like a slap. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thick. Everyone looked away, pretending not to hear. Zuri stood there, her jaw trembling, her heart breaking in a quiet, heavy way. That one sentence, "just like your father," cut deeper than anything else. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Her mother turned back to her guests, forcing a laugh, trying to brush it off. But Zuri stayed frozen in place, realizing something she'd avoided for years. Her mother didn't want a daughter, she wanted control. And for the first time, Zuri saw her not as Mama, but as a woman who refused to see the pain she caused. By the next morning, the house felt heavy with silence. The celebration was over, but the tension still clung to the walls. Zuri could barely eat. Every look her mother gave her felt sharp, every word loaded with unspoken anger. The night before had cracked something open between them, and now there was no pretending things were fine. Zuri stood in her room, staring at her half-open suitcase. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't stay here anymore. The visit that was supposed to bring them closer had only reminded her why she left in the first place. She took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen, where her mother was making tea. "Mama," she said softly, "I'm going back to Cape Town tomorrow." Her mother froze. The spoon in her hand clattered against the counter. "What did you say?" "I'm leaving in the morning," Zuri repeated. "I already checked the flights." For a moment there was silence. Then her mother's face twisted with disbelief. "So that's it? You come here for one weekend, cause drama, and then run away again." Zuri tried to stay calm. "I didn't come to fight. You told me you were dying, Mama. You lied. I can't do this anymore." Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but not the quiet kind, the stormy ones Zuri knew too well. She raised her voice, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "You hate me. You want me dead like your father." The words hit like knives. Zuri froze, her chest tight. That line, her mother's favorite weapon, dragged old wounds to the surface. She remembered being 16, standing in the same kitchen, hearing those same words after her father's funeral. It never failed to make her feel guilty, small, and powerless. But this time was different. Zuri blinked back her tears and took a deep breath. "That's not true," she said quietly, barely above a whisper. "I just need peace." Her mother didn't listen. She cried louder, her voice breaking. "After everything I've done for you, you don't care if I live or die." Zuri turned away. She walked to her room, her mother's sobs following her down the hall. She didn't argue. She didn't try to fix it this time. Instead, she began to fold her clothes slowly, placing them into her suitcase with careful hand. Her fingers trembled, but her heart felt strangely steady. Her mother's cries echoed through the house, but Zuri stayed silent. She zipped up her suitcase, the sound sharp and final, like closing a door that had been open too long. That night, she didn't sleep in her old room. She lay on the couch instead, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't peaceful, just empty. She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who tried so hard to please her mother, who believed that love meant sacrifice. But now, staring into the dark, she realized the truth. This trip hadn't healed their bond. It had exposed it. Every crack, every wound, every lie pretending to be love. And for the first time, Zuri stopped trying to fix it. She just let the silence speak for both of them. The next morning, sunlight crept through the curtains, but Zuri barely felt its warmth. The house was quiet, too quiet. Her mother hadn't come out of her room since their argument. Zuri rubbed her temples, exhausted, unsure what to feel anymore. She had cried enough for one lifetime. She walked to the kitchen to make coffee, hoping the routine would calm her. But when she reached the table, something caught her eye. A messy pile of papers stacked beside the sugar jar. She pulled them closer, scanning through them without thinking. Her heart sank. Electricity disconnection notice. Water bill overdue. Medical insurance unpaid for 3 months. Final warning from the bank. There were at least 10 envelopes, all marked urgent. Zuri sat down slowly, the papers spread out in front of her. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. The fake illness, the rush to get her home, the sudden miracle healing. It wasn't just attention her mother wanted. It was help. Financial help. Zuri closed her eyes for a moment, a dull ache spreading in her chest. All this time, she thought her mother wanted to see her because she missed her. But it was money. It was always money. She took a deep breath and called out, "Mama, can you come here for a second?" Her mother appeared in the doorway, arms folded tightly. "What is it now?" Zuri pointed at the table. "These." Mama Thandi's eyes flicked over the bills, then back to Zuri. "Why are you looking through my things?" she said sharply. "Because they were right here," Zuri replied quietly. "Mama, if you had just asked, I would have helped. You didn't need to lie." Her mother's face hardened. "Oh, please. I knew you'd say no. You always think I waste money." Zuri swallowed hard. "Because you do, Mama. Every time I send something, it disappears. And you never tell me the truth until it's too late." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The clock ticked loudly in the corner. The smell of burnt toast filled the air, but neither noticed. Zuri's voice softened. "You could have just told me you were struggling. I wouldn't have judged you. I just needed honesty." Her mother crossed her arms tighter, her chin lifting in defense. "You left me, Zuri. You don't understand how hard it is here. The bills, the pressure. You don't know what I go through." Zuri looked at her with tired eyes. "I do understand, Mama, but lying to me doesn't make it better. It just breaks what little trust we have left." For the first time, her mother didn't have a comeback. She looked away, blinking fast, her mouth pressed into a thin line. The silence between them was thick, heavy with all the things they'd never said. Zuri stood up slowly, folding one of the bills in her hand. "I'll help you this one last time," she said softly. "But I can't keep saving you, Mom. It's killing me." Her mother didn't answer. She just turned away, her shoulders trembling slightly, not from anger this time, but from something that looked a lot like shame. Zuri watched her go, feeling both heartbreak and relief. The truth had finally come out, but it didn't heal the wound. It only showed how deep it really went. The morning air was still when Zuri woke up. She lay on the couch for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, trying to gather the strength to move. Her body felt heavy, but her mind was clear. She knew what she had to do. Quietly, she got up and went to her old room. The suitcase she had unpacked days ago sat open on the floor. She began folding her clothes carefully, this time without tears. There was no anger left in her, just a quiet acceptance. Some relationships can't be fixed, no matter how much love you pour into them. As she zipped up her bag, she looked around one last time. The same walls, the same memories, but they no longer had power over her. This wasn't her home anymore. In the kitchen, the morning light spilled across the counter. Zuri placed a small white envelope beside the kettle, right where her mother always made tea. Inside was a check, enough to cover all the overdue bills she had found. She hesitated for a moment before setting it down, her fingers brushing the edge. She wasn't doing it out of guilt. She was doing it to close a chapter. She was about to leave when her mother appeared at the doorway, still in her robe. Her eyes looked swollen, as if she hadn't slept. "You're leaving already?" she asked quietly. Zuri nodded. "Yes. My flight's in 2 hours." Mama Thandi's gaze dropped to the envelope. She walked over, opened it, and stared at the check inside. Her lips trembled. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice breaking. Then she started to cry softly. "You're still my good girl." Zuri looked at her, and for a second, she saw the woman who raised her, strong, proud, and deeply flawed. She wished things could have been different, but love without honesty had only brought pain. She shook her head gently. "No, Mama," she said quietly. "I'm just not like you." Her mother's tears fell harder, but Zuri didn't stay to comfort her this time. She picked up her suitcase, walked to the door, and paused for one last look at the house she once called home. It looked smaller now, like it had shrunk with all the lies that lived inside it. At the airport, she found a seat by the window. Planes came and went outside, streaking the sky with white trails. When her flight was called, she walked slowly toward the gate, her heart strangely light. As the plane lifted off, she looked down at the city, at the place where she had learned what love could cost. But instead of sadness, she felt peace. For the first time in years, she didn't feel guilty for leaving. She didn't feel like a bad daughter. She just felt free. She leaned her head against the window and whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "Love shouldn't hurt this way." And as the clouds swallowed the city below, she let go of the pain, the guilt, and the version of herself that kept trying to fix someone who didn't want to change. When Zuri finally returned to Cape Town, the city felt different, calmer, lighter somehow. The moment she stepped into her apartment, she let out a deep sigh she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The air smelled like home, clean sheets, faint lavender, and peace. For the first time in weeks, she didn't have to tiptoe around anyone's moods. The next morning, she went back to work. Her colleagues were waiting for her at the nurse's station, all smiles and teasing. Grace, her closest friend, grinned as soon as she saw her. "So," she said playfully, "how's your sick mom?" Zuri let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "Healthier than me, apparently." Everyone chuckled, but Grace caught the sadness hiding behind Zuri's smile. When they sat down for lunch later, Grace nudged her gently. "You okay?" Zuri nodded, stirring her coffee. "Yeah, just tired. It's like every time I go home, I lose a little piece of myself." Grace didn't push further, and Zuri was grateful. There were things too heavy to explain. The lies, the guilt, the years of walking on eggshells just to keep peace. That night, when the city had gone quiet and the sea breeze blew through her window, Zuri pulled out her old journal. It had been months since she'd written anything. She sat on her bed, pen in hand, and began to pour it all out. Every manipulation, every guilt trip, every moment she had been made to feel small. She wrote about the phone call that started it all, the fake sickness, the party, the arguments, the truth. Writing it down felt like pulling splinters from her heart one by one. Painful but freeing. By the time she finished, the pages were full of messy ink and tear stains. At the bottom, she paused for a long moment before writing one final line. "Sometimes family doesn't need saving. You need distance." She stared at the words for a while, then closed the journal gently. It was the truth she had needed to say out loud for years. Zuri opened her laptop next. For months, she had been thinking about applying for a transfer, a nursing program overseas that promised growth, travel, and a fresh start. She had always hesitated before, worried about leaving her mother alone, about being called selfish again. But tonight, she didn't hesitate. She filled out the form, attached her documents, and hit send. When the confirmation email appeared on her screen, a small smile crept across her face. Her mother's lies, painful as they were, had pushed her towards something she'd been too afraid to choose for herself, freedom. She turned off the lights and crawled into bed, listening to the city hum outside her window. For the first time in a long while, she felt peace settling in her chest instead of guilt. Maybe healing wasn't about fixing broken relationships. Maybe it was about walking away from them and learning to breathe again on your own. A few quiet weeks passed in Cape Town. Zuri settled back into her routine, working long shifts, laughing with her colleagues, and spending her evenings watching the sunset from her small balcony. Life was beginning to feel normal again, peaceful. Then one afternoon, as she was folding laundry, her phone started to ring. She froze when she saw the name flash across the screen, Mama Thandi. Her stomach tightened. For a second, she thought about letting it ring out. But old habits die hard, and she still couldn't ignore her mother completely. She took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Mama." Her mother's voice came through weak and shaky, just like before. "Zuri, I'm really sick this time. Please believe me, my girl. It's bad." Zuri's heart skipped a beat. The old panic tried to rise again, the same feeling that had once made her drop everything and run. But this time she stayed still. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. Her mother sniffled. "I've been coughing for days. I can't even get out of bed." Then, suddenly, her tone changed, lighter, almost cheerful. "But don't worry, I'll be fine once you're here. You'll come, right? Everyone misses you." That shift, that playful, manipulative tone, told Zuri everything she needed to know. It was the same act, the same script. She almost smiled at how predictable it had become. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath before answering. "Mama," she said softly, "please take care of yourself. I'll send something for your medicine." There was a long silence on the other end. Then her mother's voice hardened. "So you're not coming?" "No," Zuri replied quietly. "Not this time." Before her mother could say more, she ended the call. She sat there for a while, phone in hand, listening to the soft hum of her washing machine. No anger, no tears, just peace. For the first time, she didn't feel guilty for saying no. She didn't feel like a bad daughter. She felt strong, like she had finally stepped out of a cycle that had held her hostage for years. Later that week, word spread around the neighborhood that Zuri had refused to come home. Some people whispered, saying she'd changed. But one afternoon, Mr. Dlamini, their elderly neighbor, stopped by Mama Thandi's gate. He found her sitting on the porch, staring at her phone, eyes wet but proud. "She didn't come," Mama Thandi muttered, half to herself. "She always used to come." Mr. Dlamini looked at her kindly. "You can't guilt people forever, Thandi," he said quietly. One day, they stopped answering the call. Mama Thandi didn't reply. She just looked away, her lips trembling. Back in Cape Town, Zuri stood on her balcony, the evening breeze brushing her face. Her phone sat silent on the table beside her, and for once, she didn't dread it ringing. She sipped her tea slowly, her chest calm, her heart steady. She wasn't running anymore, and she wasn't rescuing anyone either. This time, she was choosing herself. Months later, the airport buzzed with the usual noise, rolling suitcases, boarding calls, and voices blending into a steady hum. Zuri stood near her gate, holding her passport tightly in one hand and her phone in the other. Her flight to Canada was boarding soon, a new job, a new country, a new beginning. She glanced at her reflection in the glass wall beside her. The woman staring back looked different, calmer, stronger, free. The tiredness in her eyes had faded, replaced by quiet confidence. She had made it through the storm and learned how to stand on her own. While waiting, she scrolled through her phone, through photos she hadn't looked at in a long time. There it was, an old picture of her and her mother, taken years ago. Both of them were smiling, arms wrapped around each other, sunlight in their faces. For a moment, Zuri's chest tightened. It was strange how a single photo could hold so much love and pain at the same time. She stared at the picture for a few seconds longer, then whispered softly, "I forgive you, but I won't go back." A final boarding call echoed through the terminal. Zuri slipped her phone into her bag, picked up her suitcase, and took a deep breath. The morning light poured through the high windows, wrapping her in gold as she walked toward her gate. Each step felt lighter than the last. As she handed over her ticket, she looked ahead with a small, peaceful smile. In her heart, her own voice whispered, clear, honest, and calm. Family can break your heart in ways strangers never could. But one day you stop bleeding and start healing.